Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.
All right, all right. So, welcome to the State of Black Detroit 2022. This is a virtual event. Thank you so much for joining us and everything that we're doing here. You know, we appreciate all the support of Detroit is Different in what we've done. This is to support the community group of what Detroit is Different is. My name is Kari Wade Frazier. You were hearing some of my music, how a lot of people knew me in the beginning, and now people know me more so as a person that tells stories. These stories are connected to a narrative. I think that people and their journey and how they connect to different things are what connect us all. So it's very important that we have personal narratives to connect us to larger things. Those personal narratives that connect us to larger things is why Detroit is Different exists. Detroit is Different is a hub of many people that tell all types of stories. All these stories are for a platform, especially for Black voices to express ourselves about different things, our beliefs, our perspectives, our points of view, and the things that are on our heart and the things that are on our mind to move us forward. And today, as we start off for January 1st, 2022, I welcome you to a State of Black Detroit address by Yusef Bunchy Shakur. We've done this before. It was years back. I can't even really remember the year. I want to say 2014. It was at 90s Knowledge Cafe. That was back when it was off Woodward. And it was a very special event then. And now we're looking to continue this event moving forward every year annually with Yusef Bunchy Shakur. As Yusef has done his different work, he's an author, he's a father, he's a community organizer, an activist, and one of my friends. His first book, Window to My Soul, is something that's very deep, very precious, and an asset I think that you should have, especially if you have a son, a young Black son. This is something that you need to buy, get in their hands for them to read, and just learn his story of living here in this Zone 8 neighborhood and starting off organizing with the gang Zone 8, and now he organizes for families. He organizes on behalf of African people, Black people, just the community, and advocating for that, bringing the neighbor back to the hood, you know. So now we have neighborly neighbors instead of just straight up hood neighbors, just due to those conditions. And when we speak about those conditions, we're going to talk about Black Detroit. So Black Detroit, to me, as a definition and where we're coming from, is the legacy of Detroiters. It's the resilience of the people here for that creativity to exist. Black Detroit is a connection of people even beyond what Detroit is. It's the people that connect to and come to Detroit. So we think of those legacies of the greats, Dinah Washington, Joe Louis, Isaiah Thomas, these people that have traveled here and then connect to this Detroit story. Those are more celebrity folks, but then it's other people. You know, we think about Martha Jean the Queen for the voice of many people on the pulse of Detroit, and many others that have connected to this story of what Detroit means. And Detroit, to me, is a place where that culture and the creativity of what Black America is has flourished and come to life. You know, you've been watching all month, if you follow Detroit is Different, me telling different stories and connecting different stories. Yusef Bunchy Shakur is the most recent. Many people have watched what we've done in my headline of how Henry Ford is gentrifying this neighborhood right now, and his perspective on that, and how a family home is now being planned out and urban planned away because of the efforts of Henry Ford Hospital. But that neglects what Black Detroit represents. Also, you have the story of my father, Greg Frazier, his story connecting to the city of Detroit, starting off in General Motors and then Burroughs, and then expanding into his own entrepreneurial journey. One of my best friends, Michael Willingham, who is going to design the Detroit is Different NFT, and what he does with jewelry and different design. You also had the story of Baba Malik Yakini, and we went back and forth a little bit about capitalism and what exists, but more so about resources. And that's what we're going to talk about today, as Yusef Bunchy Shakur will give this fruitful address. And I thank you all for definitely tuning in and catching and watching what we're going to create here. So when we think about Black Detroit, like I say, I think creativity, I think culture, and I think our people. So that's definitely community. Creativity, culture, community, those are the pillars of what I think are Black Detroit. And the legacy to pass on in transition as we grow. One of the tough things is many people inside Black Detroit feel that they're trapped. They don't see those opportunities. So in this address, we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to also talk about housing. We're going to talk about education, justice, economics, access to opportunity, and legacy. This is the premise of what we're talking about as we recognize this is the final day of Kwanzaa, the first fruit celebration. As a people, Black people here in America, it's good to recognize and think about a lot of this. So, on this day of Imani faith, the last day of Kwanzaa, we start off the year 2022, and we're talking Black Detroit. And this is going to be a legacy that continues. Please, if you have the opportunity, make sure you give to the Detroit is Different community group and all of our efforts. You see everything scrolling across the bottom. Feel free to give to Cash App or PayPal and just support what we're doing with this vision and this mission. Thank you so much. And thank you for starting your year with us for the State of Black Detroit address. And now, with that being said, I'm going to pass over to Yusef Bunchy Shakur.
That help nurture and develop a Black Detroit. And I think, Kari and myself didn't have a deep conversation around what's the importance of a Black State of Black Detroit address. I think that's the importance, the essence of this conversation. I've done something similar like this, what we call the state of the neighborhood address. And so as I repeated, like in times like this, so to understand Black Detroit is to take a step back. As Kari acknowledged his father, right? His father's parents, as me acknowledging my grandmother, Mary Lee, my other grandmother, Minnie Lee, my grandfather, James and Walter, their way of Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. Many of our elders come from the South, and they began to migrate to the Midwest, Detroit in particular, through the 1950s, all the way up to the 1970s. Why? Why did they migrate? They migrated for the purpose of escaping white domination, white terrorism in the South, to only face it up here. It was a different type of white domination, of white terrorism, but it presented an economic opportunity through the many factories that our grandparents began to work in. And one of the topics is around economics, right? But to understand, we try to get to economics and to unpack economics, we're talking about money. Let's just call it what it is. But if the money idea is not governed by love, it's not governed by care, we know as the old saying, money is the root of all evil. Money is not evil itself. It becomes evil as a result in a capitalist society. When I say capitalist, I'm talking about an economic system that puts a premium on those who have the opportunity to determine what the value of something is. Everybody else is just a consumer from that basis on. But understanding the economics from a Black perspective, not all of our elders, our family member was able to get on that train, that bus, or fit in that car to come make it to Detroit, Michigan. So maybe our grandfather, maybe his brother and his uncle or someone, came and they got situated. They got to working, they got to hustling and whatever they needed to do. But also in there, what we've forgotten, they sent money back down south. They sent money back down south to help sustain the family, but also to create opportunities to bring the family here. So the economics was not about the individual per se. Now, Granddaddy may went to the juke joint. Granddaddy, may went to the bar, or he may have did a little trick and whatever. Who knows? But he never, or they never, or she never took their eyes off the prize. Why? Because the money was not determined for the individual. The money was determined for the collective. And so as we began to migrate to Detroit, we became, it was a few of us. It became hundreds of us. Then it became thousands of us, right? And in Detroit, 1967 is a landmark. July 28, July 29, 1967. The landmark is what white people call the riot, Black people call the rebellion. However, prior to this situation that exploded in Detroit, white people began to move was moving slowly but surely out of Black neighborhood or their neighborhoods, which was predominantly white neighborhood. A lot of people hear me talk about Zone 8. No one ever asked me, besides the fact that I was a gang member in Zone 8, one of the guys that helped start the gang Zone 8. But beyond that, why Zone 8 is so significant to me? Because the house that we live in, my mother still lives in, my grandfather bought in 1952. My grandfather bought in 1952. So again, if you know the history of being black, right, the transition of working for someone to working for yourself, to living in someone else's house, to now you're in a position to own your own house, right? That was powerful for me as a little boy growing up under those circumstances. The land that I played on, the porch that I sat on, my grandfather owned. It meant everything to me. It gave me pride. Like, all pride is not bad. Like, there is a such thing as good pride, right? And that was one aspect of it. So that's why Zone 8 is so significant to me, from a legacy, from a family tradition, right? And many of us have this same type of legacy in Detroit, but the seeds those seeds have evaporated to the fact that, you know, we're selling grandma's house, or we sold granddaddy's house, because we bought into this notion of assimilating, and assimilating has evaporated the roots of who we are. It has evaporated the roots of who we are. So getting back, so this is the foundation, right? So 67, white folks are already developing or laying the foundation for white flight. 67 hit, white flight becomes the modern day movements, similar to us coming to Detroit. You know, they began to migrate into the suburbs, right? As they migrate in the suburbs, Detroit changed. The landscape changes. This is where Detroit becomes Black Detroit. By default, I repeat, Detroit became Black Detroit by default, right? However, you had folks organizing. You had folks doing a lot of phenomenal, incredible things. Again, we can't talk about Black Detroit without talking about, you know, Reverend Albert Cleage, you know, the founder of the Shrine of Black Madonna. Like, there's probably nobody or a family in Detroit that has not been impacted by the Shrine of Black Madonna, right? And when you immediately think about it, you probably say no. But if you go deep, so many of our family members, so many of our neighbors had joined that church because they was everywhere. You know, they was doing a lot of different things. But not only doing that, they also was working with other people. You know, they was working with James and Grace Lee Boggs. They was working with the Henry brothers. They founded what became to be known as the Grassroots Leadership Conference, that was founded in 1963. This is where Malcolm comes to Detroit and gives the famous lecture, what we all know as Message to the Grassroots, which was literally right around the corner from where we at now, at King Solomon Church. And this message was a result of a split. The split occurred between Aretha Franklin's father, who was trying to organize a civil rights organization in the North, particularly having Detroit as the home base. And the split occurred because he wanted to follow in the same tradition of Martin Luther King at that time and others, of having a nonviolent stance, where, you know, Jimmy, the Henry brothers, who ultimately developed what was called Go. At the time, they was organized out of an organization called Gold. They ultimately, after the assassination of Malcolm X, they founded what was called the Malcolm X Society. And March 28th, they end up helping with others found what became known as the Republic of New Africa here in Detroit. So you had these very revolutionary, very militant, same with what we know Reverend Cleage was very militant, right? So this split occurred. And this split was a temperature of a lot of folks in Detroit. But also in examining that split, we see still today, when you had the least of those of us who were struggling on the ground, who didn't have economic opportunities, who were struggling around housing, who were struggling around justice, or the lack of justice, the lack of opportunities, who was on the ground level. And then you had, you know, Reverend Franklin and others who had assimilated into Detroit and the other aspect of having opportunities, right? But they was promoting a certain narrative that supported the opportunities that was granted to them. And this is so sophisticated because this is a pattern that continues to happen in the past and in the present. And also another organization, again, we can't we'll be remiss if we didn't mention, which was the League of Black Revolutionary Workers. Here's a book, Detroit, I Do Mine Dying. And all these folks was working in organizing, right? And many of these folks was at the cornerstone. And there's so many other people whose names get unmentioned in this type of talk, but who was at the ground level of help formulating. And more importantly, the ground level, it represented the heart and spirit of Detroiters, Black Detroiters. And the distinction is, it's around the struggle of liberation, the struggle of freedom. Some of it's called equality, or some of it's called equity, and things of that nature. Right? It's different names, but fundamentally at its base, it was a freedom struggle. And Black people embraced that. Why? Because it wasn't a new struggle. It was a continuation of what we faced in the South. It just looked different in the North because the enemy was different, in terms of the clash of how white people thought and functioned here in Michigan versus how white people thought and functioned in Alabama or Mississippi, right? But fundamentally, the same tactics, right? And without that understanding, we don't understand the importance of what many of us grow up in, a predominantly Black city. This is the foundation. So coming into the 70s, these factories, jobs are no longer presenting opportunities to purchase homes, presenting opportunities to be the breadwinner of the family. But what we've lost in that transition of coming from the South and coming to the North is the cornerstone of being Black, being African. Like, Black and African is the same. Black and African is the same, right? And what I mean by that is we are descendant of African people. That is ultimately our nationality. It doesn't make us an African because we wasn't, or less African because we wasn't born in Africa. Like Malcolm said, and when I say Malcolm, I'm talking about Malcolm X. Malcolm he once said, we hate Africa, but they love Africa. And the they is white people. Like, they tell us not to go there, but they're there. Why? Because they continue to figure out how to stay in power. They've continued to figure out how to steal the resources out of Africa, out of certain countries, right, and position themselves to oversee, right? And so when you connect those dots and understanding those transitions and those qualities of values, that thought process was what many of us call the Southern way. We go down south and they speak to us, hey, the hospitality, and that's what I mean. But we lost that. And we lost that in the hustle. We lost that in the struggle of trying to figure out how to maintain. And this is again where we underestimate the environment and how the environment plays such a crucial role. So the environment in the South made us be more nurturing and more loving and more caring and more thoughtful. Like, poverty was never a reason to not love each other, to not support each other. Poverty and racism was the reason why we did love each other, why we did support each other, why we did protect each other. Because we knew when our mothers walked down the street at a certain time that they potentially could be raped. They potentially can be beat. So either we watched them as they walked down the street, or we met them somewhere. We knew that our fathers had faced their own form of oppression, right? So there was never a confusion about being oppressed. There was never this oppressive dynamics where we're competing with each other. We were still learning those dynamics, but however, we knew we all faced a level of oppression for one being Black, for our ideology, for our gender, across men and women, and as well as based upon our sexuality. And so when you come in, the foundation of coming into Detroit into the 70s, and we transition to the 80s, shit has just collapsed. It collapsed to the point where, the drug trafficking comes in. The drug, you already had heroin that infiltrated the Black communities, but it doesn't have the same impact when crack cocaine comes. I always say that heroin put us to sleep. When heroin put us to sleep, crack cocaine came and waking. It was like a Mike Tyson blow. He just knocked the shit out of us, right? But what we don't always say with crack cocaine in the drug trafficking period, it was the new economic opportunity. Again, this is where we don't connect capitalism in a sense, and again, like wherever you land on capitalism, I'm gonna just frame it this way: capitalism as an economic opportunity. That's what the drug trafficking became. It became an economic opportunity through heroin, through crack cocaine, right? But what we don't examine is that economic opportunity led to what? It led to further destruction of black bodies, of black minds, and black spirits. To help you understand that point, for me to, growing up in the 80s and, in the shadows of a YBI, Young Boys Incorporated, growing up in the 80s in the shadows of a Chamber Brothers, another on the east side, the Best Friends. I mean, many of these black drug organizations that are illuminating through the streets, that are illuminating through Detroit, right? And these are the Michael Jordans. These are the Oprah Winfreys that are being placed in front of us. You like, shit, I want to be like him. And to be more exact, on my corner there was Big Daddy. I wanted to be like Big Daddy, who drove a nice ass Eldorado, who owned stores throughout the neighborhood, right? But to be like Big Daddy, I had to not give a fuck. I repeat, to be like Big Daddy, I had to not give a fuck. To sell dope, you had to not give a fuck. To rob, you had not to give a fuck. That became your methodology to trying to pursue economic wealth in this country, or particularly in this city. As a result of that methodology, leads to destruction, mass destruction. That mass destruction is ultimately turned into selling dope to my best friend's mother. That mass destruction ultimately turned into tricking with my best friend's sister. I mean, this is the devastation, and going inside and looking at the devastation when crap becomes king. But in that same process, black folks who had economic opportunities are feeling the pain as well. The pain of my mother turns into a crack addict. My father ultimately goes to prison, right? I get an opportunity. I graduate from Cass. I graduate from Renaissance. I graduate from Northwestern. I get a job. Man, I'm on the next thing smoking. I'm out this bitch. And leaving, we lost our way of how staying connected to each other, because in every problem we faced it. In particular, in this problem, we ran from it. And so in running from it, the neighborhoods changed dramatically. And it changed from being a neighborhood, right, to being a hood. And in the hood, the things that we began to take pride in was negative stuff. It was the art of survival became the cornerstone, right? And the word hood became a code word, right, for being black. And it has evolved and changed over the years from being black to being tough to being gangster. And we underestimate the self-destruction in the hood. We underestimate the undevelopmentness that's in the hood. We see it, but we've separated ourselves from that. Dr. Carl Taylor, former professor at Michigan State University, he describes it as the third city, right? The third city is in comparison what we know globally as third world conditions. We see the suffering, we see the lack of outside of the United States, but we don't necessarily apply that same analysis, right? And so what I've done was taking what Carl and built on that. So Detroit as an urban city is a third city, but inside the third city, you have third world neighborhoods, Zone 8, Mack and Bewick, Linwood, right? But there's an external responsibility, which lays on the city government, but then there's internal responsibility. Well, again, where we fled, right? And I'm not condemning people for fleeing, because the first law of nature is to take care of yourself, to take care of your family. But it's in that vein, in that thought process, that it became a counterbalance to being able to love each other, to support each other. Because when we had less, we did more for each other. Now that we have more, or the perception of more, we do less for each other, right? And this is where, again, connecting the dots, where education is so important. And that education, the miseducation of the Negro, right? And to understand, as I mentioned earlier, is like the individual I talked about, their leadership was different than the leadership that we see now, the leadership that we've experienced over the last 50 and 40 years. And that leadership was what Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, a true leader is one who sits on the top of the mountain, who comes parachutes in. A true leader is one that lives with the people, that eats with the people, that talks with the people, that walks with the people. That's what leadership looks like. That's the definition of black leadership. It has to be. Anything else than that is bullshit. Anything less than that is bullshit. You cannot serve something that you are not connected to. You cannot serve something that you do not authentically love. Chokwe Lumumba once said, if you don't love the people, you will betray the people. And we see a lot of goddamn betraying going on nowadays. We see a lot of goddamn betraying going on nowadays. And we wonder why the young people say, I'm just trying to get the bag. I just want the bag. The bag has become our eyes on the prize. And so as I repeated earlier, if our goal is to get the bag, and you're willing to do whatever to get the bag, what do you think the outcome will become? Is what we see in modern day present Detroit. The lack of access to opportunities and resources is a result of this confusion, the result of chasing this bag. And so you look at the economic opportunities in Detroit, in particular in the neighborhoods or what we identify as hood. Most of them are surviving off of crumbs. They're surviving off check to check. It's beyond check to check. It's off fumes, right? But also, then you have this ton of money that's coming in through corporations. You have this ton of money that's coming in through nonprofits. But how much of that money is getting down to the people? Not a lot of it. And this is where white supremacy as a methodology, right? So white supremacy as a definition, it is being defined as a thinking disorder of European people. I repeat, white supremacy is a thinking disorder of white people. It's a reflection of the inferiority complex. It's nothing superior, but the supremacy is in terms of them trying to be dominant. And they position themselves to be dominant because of they engaged in a war. And they defeated us. They defeated other people. And then coming out of that war, they allowed for us to participate. So no one can ever conquer you and give you your freedom. It doesn't. It will never be freedom. There's no such thing as someone giving you your freedom. You take back what is yours. You earn that through battle. Because why? It brings a certain level of pride. It allows you to restore what was taken from you. And that's where, again, it helps us understand the destruction of the black civilization. And as we connect the destruction of the black civilization, we're talking about the destruction of our minds. And so in reclaiming our minds, we have to examine the structures that we function in. And one particular structure is like black history. Like slavery is not black history. Slavery is American history. How black people responded to slavery is black history, which was resistance, which was developing ourselves despite of. And to illustrate my point, the white Jews, they've done a great job in doing this. Malcolm X said white people can teach us a lot if we sit and we critically examine them. And what I mean by white Jews, like when they talk about the Holocaust, it's not from someone else's perspective. It's not someone else's narrative. It is their own narrative about the Holocaust. It is their resistance. It is how they develop themselves out of that experience, right? But more importantly, their motto, their mantra is that would never happen to us again. That is why they've embraced it in the way they have. And we have not taken that same type of lesson to what folks call slavery. Because we have to go beyond slavery and go to colonization, right? And in modern time, we talk about anti-blackness, but to understand anti-blackness, we have to first understand anti-African. It was out of that emerged in the modern world anti-blackness. So what I mean by that, right? So when white people, the Portuguese, the British, and etc., begins to come to Africa, they already know what they're coming for, man. They got gold, they got silver, they got ivory. And more importantly, these motherfuckers, they physically strong. Like we can use that labor for something, right? So they got a game plan. But to make this work, to sell this back to that people, they had to create a narrative. And that narrative was that we was heathens, that we was pagans, that we was less than human beings, that we was uncivilized. That is the narrative that they've created because we dressed a certain way. We talk different. And you fast forward it, those same dynamics that we're still trying to overcome. Because I remember as a child, the worst thing that you could have called me or my friends was an African booty stretcher. And I think that for most generations, and probably still to this day, but why? Because the negative concept that we had around Africa. Again, I mean, for every generation, we all sat and watched Tarzan. Some white kid grows up in the African jungles and conquers the natives, the uncivilized, conquers the animals. Right? This is the brainwashing that we go through. So fundamentally, part of the state of Black Detroit is to understand who we are as Black people connected to our African heritage. Right? And once we understand that, nowhere in hell a Mike Duggan becomes the mayor of Black Detroit. I repeat, if we understand truly who we are and we accept it and we embrace that, nowhere in hell a Mike Duggan becomes a mayor of a predominantly Black city, right? I remember, when he first ran and won, I joked, or I made the statement, which was a joke, I'm gonna move to Livonia and run for mayor. It didn't matter if it was white, if it was Black, if it was purple, everybody laughed. Everybody laughed. Why did they laugh? Because there was a form of anti-Blackness. And that form of anti-Blackness is no way in hell will a Black man, a Black woman, a Black LGBTQ person, no Black child, no Black anything, whatever have the opportunity or the right to, you can run, but you will never be elected as a mayor of Livonia. And I get it, for Black folks, we've never taken that position wholeheartedly where we hate white people. But we have to take the position, particularly when you look at a Duggan who comes out of being a prosecutor. He represents white corporations. He represents a different level of an interest. He didn't homegrown come out of Black bottom or nothing like that. So it can allow us to even consider it. And this is where like this social justice language, this social justice landscape. So I mean, you even having in Detroit, you have social justice organization gentrifying in Black communities. I repeat, you have social justice organization gentrifying in Black communities. They're knocking us off by hiring a few of us and putting us in positions, but the philosophy, the ideology and whatnot is controlled and manipulated by white people, right? And what we have to do is we have to sit down, we have to close our ranks. We have to have deeper conversations because all these things are a tool. And how do we use these tools to be able to manifest our liberation? How do we manifest to creating and sustaining? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, if we don't change the landscape in poor Black Detroit, in the Black neighborhoods, nothing else will matter, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, why are we not working more closely together in 2022? Like, we all know each other. We all cool. We talk shit, we make phone calls, and a lot of it is only when we need each other, right? What happened to what the mandate of working together, where we have a common foe, we have a common understanding around some common values, and this is what capitalism is more than just an economic philosophy. It is a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle that we've taken where again it feeds our ego. Again, when you're talking about oppressed people, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. talked about it very clearly, where he said to be oppressed is to feel ashamed. And to make my point, think back when you was a child, when you had to run, where the hand-me-downs, the clothes that was passed down from your big brother or your big sister, that was passed down, or you went to the mom and pop shop instead of J.C. Penney's, or you may move it up to Kingsway, right? You know, when there was a Kingsway, and go and get some clothes versus when Foot Locker came out, right? This impacts the human spirit, and we're still held captive to that to this day, and we have no ability to structure we have not developed a structure of what leadership looks like. We have not developed what values look like. So people just can't, because you go to a protest and tomorrow you're activist. You go to a protest and tomorrow you're a leader. Like, that cannot be the standard. We have to create more opportunities to be able to train, to be able to develop, to be able to question, to be able to assess individuals, versus just parachuting in and determining what things are in our community. Because if we don't do that, we're going to continue to be scattered, right? We have to stop allowing folks to persuade us into saying, putting all our eggs into the basket of voting. Like, voting is our ancestors didn't die for the right to vote. I repeat, our ancestors didn't die for the right to vote. Our ancestors died for the right to be free. And they saw voting as a tool in that opportunity, right? And we have to examine how we've engaged in that process. I'm not saying we shouldn't engage in it. I'm saying we have to create a philosophy. We have to create a methodology. We have to create a strategy of how we want political change through engaging electoral politics. Because now you have we've always had individuals, for the most part, who come in and say, I want your vote. Will you vote for me? I'll do this and I'll do that. And we vote for them. And we vote for them, And when they get in, they do the opposite. Because one, we have not created a tangible accountability between them and us. But on the other hand, there's accountability between them and the corporations that they're supporting. To be more exact, the white corporation. So again, these are the things that we have to examine, right? Mayor Coleman Young, we all love him. We all adore him. But rarely do I hear people criticize Coleman Young. And there's a lot of criticism that he deserves. I mean, one, like when we talk about the tax abatement, right? Coleman Young helped usher the tax abatement that we see nowadays in the city of Detroit. But putting that in context, right? Coleman Young becomes the first mayor in the city of Detroit, becomes the second black mayor in the state of Michigan after Art Blackwell and Highland Park. So can you imagine? So unpack it and get into the dynamics, right? Can you imagine? Coleman Young becomes the first black mayor in the late 70s. Coming to the 80s, he goes to a Democratic Party. We'll safely assume and say at that time, and we'll say by 83, he's at a Democratic conference. There's probably about 20 other black politicians. Everybody else is white. I repeat, every other politician in this room is white. Do you think because they're so-called Democrats, are they truly and really different than the Republicans? Right? So Coleman Young and others are left to deal or play the cards that was dealt with him, the hand that was dealt to him. I mean, again, this is the context that we don't have. We don't examine, but we just get happy that we elected Coleman Young. Coleman Young would say motherfucker. He was a very charismatic. He was a very popular people's type of person. He comes out of Black Bottom. He had all the things, right? But what was missing? The black slate that helped get Coleman Young elected and so many other black politicians elected is no longer what it was. The black community is no longer Black Detroit is no longer what it was in terms of the cornerstone of the black movement, the black organization. Teferi Shakur said, if we're not growing with our movement, we're not growing with the people, we're ultimately dying. Not just physically, we're dying mentally. And this death becomes as a result of not continuing to examine these circumstances of social conditions that are changing. So, fast forward. We've had so many black folks leave Detroit, black Detroit. Nowadays, I'm talking about the hood. And what's crazy, you got more white people living in the hood than you have of so-called educated black folks, so-called black folks who have good jobs. And we have to examine that situation. I understand it. I mean, some of it's a level of assimilation, and some of it is so much pain, it's so much trauma that comes with walking down Ferry Park, that comes with walking down Linwood, that comes with walking down Mack and Bewick, that it make you cry. But we cannot heal what we're not afraid to confront. It's okay to love black people. It's okay to be black. It's okay to love us. It's okay to be who we are. I mean, I'm not saying be so black that you black yourself out. Repeat, I'm not saying you be so black that you black yourself out. I'm saying that you be so black that you love your black self, that you love your black brother, your black sister. You love the black person who may have a different sexuality than you, right? You love, there's no way in hell when you come back to the black neighborhoods, what we now know as black hoods, this cannot be the norm, this self-destruction. So many abandoned schools in these black neighborhoods. We all should have a psychological examination of our minds, because it will help us realize the impact of what we see and what we experience, the internal scars that's on our hearts that we carry, individually and collectively. So for us to move forward liberation, from a leadership standpoint, to be able to achieve the type of justice, to be able to build the type of access to opportunities, to even to maneuver in economics, right? So to understand those things, we have to have a collective framework. We have to have a collective value system. This does not mean that we all have to like each other. This does not mean that we all have to go to the parties and drink together. No, what this means is that it creates a standard, it creates a criteria for accountability and how we move. No longer can individuals, the big black man that's charismatic, that's 6'4", talking good, looking good, cannot no longer just come in and tell us what the fuck we think we want to hear. That shit doesn't work. The black woman that comes in who has a degree from the University of Michigan or Wayne State or wherever can't just come in talking all educated and just sell us a fucking dream. The black LGBTQ person can't come in and say, I suffer because I'm just black LGBTQ, that have a right to move up to the top of the food chain. No, we have to create a criteria that governs black bodies. Whether you're a black man, whether you're a black woman, whether you're a black LGBTQ or you're a black child, and how we function within collectively. And to zero in, we have this Buy Black campaign. Theoretically, it makes sense. But practically, many of us question that. Again, if you come to Mama Cool House and you just purchasing from here, and there's no matrix, or there's no system put in place that this money is going back into the black community. It's going back into black families. So we just assume by supporting a black business that it benefits, or the money recycles without the commitment or developing a system for that. We can't make that type of assumption in today's time. We have to demand more of ourselves. We cannot continue to exclude our political framework, our economic thought process, our social behavior, and putting them in individual boxes. That is not the African way. We're a communal people. We're communal. That's how we function. So we have to function that way economically, politically, socially, educationally, culturally. But to do that, we have to understand who we are. So the question, as we get close to wrapping this up, is what are you reading? What are you studying to be able to understand how to be black? One of the most powerful books that I read was Enemy Class of the Races. This brother, I believe, he was born here in Detroit, Hakeem Madabouti. And what was so powerful about this book, he examines, the black perspective from black lives, and the ability to be able to define who our enemy is, whether it was a white person or a black person. Because black people can be our enemy. But we have to develop a system. How do we deal with our enemy? And fundamentally around economics. Everybody and their mama got a GoFundMe up now. Everybody and their mama try to raise money. Why? Because money is a tool. We all need money. But the question is, and it's been a question that we all been trying to figure out, can we bring 10 people together? Can we bring 20 people together? Can we bring 100 people together that say for a year we're going to donate whatever I can and create a fund? Because fundamentally, if we're not funding our own organization, we're not funding our own change, we're always going to be defeated. Why? Because those who control the money will ultimately determine the process. Those who control the money will ultimately determine the process, right? So this is the myth of the black dollar. Because the myth of the black dollar, we're going to realize the black dollar is nothing but a consumer dollar, right? None of us are sitting around with a big bank. But can we shift and transform? Absolutely. We have to sit at the table and commit ourselves, and we have to transform our thinking, transform our values. So again, we're going to support this black business, but this black business is going to support the black community. We're gonna take wherever we work at, we're gonna commit to creating a fund for supporting black people. Because fundamentally, right now, as I opened up, we're in the worst of times. But the worst of times have always been the best of times for us, because it made us rise to the occasion to love each other, to support each other. I can tell you all the great shit I've done as an individual in Black Detroit, but it don't mean shit. Why? Because it's an individual. It means greater when we can bring our accomplishments together, when we can work to accomplish things together. Again, I know I can be rough around the edges. I know I can be narrow-minded at times. I know I can be bullheaded at times. I see a shit a certain way, right? And I've reconciled and resolved a lot of those things, because at the end of the day, that's what transformation is about. But there's a value system that I uphold. And I think people find that complicated because it makes them question their own value system. Money would never determine our relationship. Money would never determine my relationship to black people. How you love and how you respond and how you're educating yourself and how you're committed to black people will always determine how we operate and relate to each other. That's what's important to me, right? I don't need to be the leader of shit. Why? Because I know my mission is to be a servant. I'm content in my heart to be the leader of who I am, to be the leader of my family, to be the leader to provide for my son, to be a leader, to be an example for my community. That's what leadership in that sense means to me, but also understand accountability to my community, to building in those things where Yusef is just no longer just a thumb. He's just no longer just a wild individual just out doing whatever he wants to. That's the perception. But the reality, Yusef is tied to a community. That's why we named the house after Mama Kur. We engage other people to help in this process. And so this is the legacy, right? The legacy of being black and being in Detroit is to figuring out, how do we work together? How do we produce politicians that's going to be committed to black Detroit, to the black folks unapologetically? How do we create an economic structure that no longer exploit us, where it's being tokenized through a social justice framework, where we're challenging white people. Repeat, we're challenging white people to use their whiteness in service of black people, where we're no longer just letting black bodies or white bodies just continue to just move in Detroit because it's a new hotbed, and they move to the top of the food chain, and now they determine what shit looks like. We're challenging the old guard. The old guard of motherfuckers that's been in leadership positions 30, 40, 50 years. And they don't want to relinquish shit because they're getting paid off this shit, right? There's a lot of tough questions we have to ask ourselves. And there's tougher decisions that we have to make. And in that, there's probably going to cause a lot of more suffering. But through that suffering, it'll create a better world for ourselves, particularly for future generations. Thank you. Yusef Bunchy Shakur, Black Detroit.
Can you go down the list?
Yeah, so again, I mean, in talking about those things, again, leadership in Detroit right now is chaotic. It's chaotic in the sense of, the ground level of Detroit leadership. I mean, you have folks who are doing what they think they're doing, and you can't knock them. You salute them, but I mean, fundamentally, like I shared, like what have you read? What have you studied? Who have you sought out to learn from? just instead of just showing up. So again, housing. We know housing has always been a problem. It's more of a problem now. Again, and that's tied to economics. More importantly, it's tied to opportunities. And so all these things are, without having those things, it escapes justice. Justice cannot occur. But to get the access to all these, to the opportunities, to reframing the economics, to achieving justice, to having education, to establishing housing, to building leadership, we have to understand our legacy. And that's what I've been talking about. The legacy being black, the legacy of our elders, but also the goal is not to try to be our grandparents. The goal is not to try to be those who came before us, but to learn. But also, we have to have a commitment to Black Detroit, unapologetically. And that's what's missing. But we just can't have people just come up here like when they shouting Black Power. Raise your hands. What does Black Power mean? Raise your hand. What do you live in Black Detroit? What neighborhood do you represent? What community? You just can't just parachute in. Motherfuckers just can't get in front of us, talking pretty and sounding all educational, intellectual, but empty than a motherfucker around values, empty than a motherfucker around love, empty than a motherfucker around commitment, empty than a motherfucker around dedication, that is actually afraid of the people. You cannot love and serve the people you're afraid of. You cannot be a puppet for the establishment. I'm not saying we can't have a working relationship, but it has to be on the terms of those who have the least of. It has to be based upon this fundamental question that I just came across a book I was reading. I'm currently reading about the Institute of the Black World, and they asked this question: is it in the interest of Black people? And whatever we do, we have to ask that question: is it in the interest of Black people? But we have to go deeper, because again, some of us so slick, we can answer very sophisticatedly. What people are you connected to? What neighborhood are you connected to? What other organization? This is part of the new demand. You no longer can just work by yourself. You no longer just be egotistic and just running out here just saying, we doing this. No, we doing the work. We have to define these things. This is how we create the accountability to be able to reshape and redefine and move ourselves where we can address the housing conditions and where people are losing their houses every day. And as they're losing their houses, others are coming and buying it for dirt cheap. And so this is tied to economics. As you and I was talking yesterday, Kari, and there's no banks that's going to ultimately give you and I a loan. No, they might give us one today, but 10, 5, 6 years ago, they wasn't giving us loans, and there's a lot of us who are still not given the opportunity to get that, right? So why are we not creating those things? Again, if that's a problem, the solution is we save our money up. We contribute to that, right? But we have to address the self-hatred in ourselves to address these issues of leadership, of housing, of education, of justice, economics, access to opportunity. And it comes out of our legacy. And more importantly, we have to examine these social justice organizations. We have to hold them more accountable. We have to demand more of them. They just can't come in and tell us what we want to hear. Because in these organizations, they put individuals that look like us but don't relate to us, don't have the commitment and the passion, where it now become exploitive. So it goes back to our legacy to be able to achieve and put the Black Detroit in the position that it needs to be.
All right, so now I'm going to just shoot some questions your way related to this. You spoke on leadership and housing. What role does education play in Black Detroit today, moving forward, as we think about everything that's happening with the students? What role does that play?
First of all, we have to unpack that. And I'll be quick and brief. In unpacking that, there's two forms of education. There's the external education, and then there's the internal education. Anybody get a chance, Google or go to YouTube and Google Dr. Bobby E. Wright. He wrote this book, The Psychopath Racial Personality. And there's the Brothers with the Ancestors now. But in this lecture he does, he talks about prior to him going off to college. And college became a tool. He received his first education. As they say, you receive your first education from your home. So, and we know the dynamics in our homes are fucked up, in a lot of them. So again, like, we have freedom schools. We have to create those new opportunities to be able to re-educate our minds. Like, so if you educate me, if I don't know who I am, I go off to Wayne State, I go off to UD Mercy, I go off to Michigan State, I go off to University of Michigan. When I come out of those institutions, what interest you think I'm going to serve? I'm going to serve the interest of what that institution has cultivated in me through that education. So if I don't have a black education to be able to take that other education that I'm giving to know how to wield that into serving black people, I become a puppet and a pawn against my own without even realizing. To give an example, I have a degree from Lane Community College. I have a degree from the University of Michigan Dearborn. I have a degree from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and I'm currently working on my PhD. But prior to any of that, I've had my first degree in black education, which has taught me how to use all those other degrees to serve black people.
All right, in that same zone, the next question I have, justice. Where does justice stand today when we're thinking of what's happening with Black Detroit?
I mean, we have to be careful. And what I mean by that, we have to define justice from a radical and revolutionary standpoint, because we're suffering from what W.E. Du Bois talked about or wrote about, this double consciousness of trying to be American, being African, or being black. So give an example, in the Floyd, George Floyd, the individual was convicted, right? And we're celebrating that. Why are we celebrating that? Because so many others have not been convicted. But what we don't understand is the trick. Here's how they trick us, right? They convicted him, but how many others of us that will be convicted later on? And so this is the slippery slope, right? Because ultimately those of us who are in the abolitionist work of anti-prisons, anti-police, now because of the pain and the hurt, and that we want some form of justice. Like, we have to truly define justice, not just based upon emotionalism, not just based upon revenge. Justice has to be radical. Justice has to be transformative. Justice has to be about serving, along with also accountability.
All right, we spoke a little bit on justice, and you've already touched on economics, but when we think of economics today in the black community, moving in 2022, what consciousness is best to have when we think about sharing? Because the resources of economics, as you talked about, money, usually controls who will, we submit to that. But what other resources should we be looking for to pull from, to build on, to build upon in Black Detroit so that we can sustain our own communities built from that Kuji Chakalia of self-determination?
That's a great question. And part of that is, here's another book, Collective Courage. In this book, it talks about cooperative economics. It has been a lesson, it has been a lived experience of black people. As I repeated earlier, we are a communal people. So let's take the concepts that so many of us has embraced. Entrepreneurship, right? So which means you have a business, I have a business. By the definition of it, we're in competition of each other. Why? Because you're trying to survive your business, I'm trying to survive my business. But when we take entrepreneurship and we put it in a cooperative bucket, repeat the key word, cooperative, meaning that we have to be cooperative with each other. But this goes back to what I talked about earlier. What are the values going to determine? It just can't be about money. Because again, if it's about money, what we know historically, we ultimately fall out. Why? Because at some point, your pie may be bigger than my pie. And this is what values addresses the greed in us. This is what values addresses the ego in us. And so and part of this, we have to fundamentally, like there's this concept of, so just hypothetically, there's There's people who are doing work around houses. Like you have your house with the Detroit's different. I have the Mama Cool house. Quasi has the garage and the shed, right? A couple other people. And we're all uniquely different. And we created a banner for us to work together, how to coexist. We're creating a collective calendar. We're collectively fundraising. We collectively, the money. So the social capital, the political mindset that I bring, right, is one section. Then what you bring, it builds up. What Quasi bring, it builds up. What such and such, it builds up. Right? It magnifies our power. There's no such thing as an individual power in a global in a struggle that we have. And so economically wise, again, it's tied to our social, it's tied to our education, but also what happens is we end up trying to duplicate the same work. And sometimes that is not bad. But if it doesn't have a strategy, if it's not governed by a methodology for a particular reason, this is where it becomes bad. Because again, you have forces on the outside determining how our movements, how our business should look. Why? Because we're not funding it. And more importantly, we don't have a perspective about being black. We compromise that. Well, I'm black, but I think I want to help other people. You can have that, but first and foremost, we have to help ourselves. We have to get us together, right? Because every other people do it. Like we all question, like why is there so many Arabs or Middle Eastern people that run businesses in the black community, where you don't see this in in their community, right? There's something. It's more about. It's not just about economics. It's about a culture. It is about a lifestyle. They're not going to allow that to happen. It doesn't mean that they don't like us. They're protecting their borders. We have to protect our own borders and being able to create an environment that's saying a value in black life and value in black money that is beyond economics, that is willing economics to serve black people. So part of this is institutions. Institutions are not made for black people or people to serve them. Institutions are made to serve black people. The same with ideology. Ideology is not developed to serve or for people to serve it. It's for it to serve people. And so these are things that we have to come back to the drawing board to question, to get a deeper understanding of.
All right. And you spoke on this, but before we get into the last two, because I think the last two are points I really want you to drive home, leadership. And we see in the comments a lot of people saying poverty pimps. We see comments, cooperative economics and imperialism can't exist in the same space. Different people dropping gems and definitely appreciating what has been given for freedom fighters. And just speaking on freedom fighters, the role of leadership and the role of leading a community of our people in Black Detroit today. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What are the things that a person that wants to step into a leadership position in our community of Black Detroit should be cognizant of? How should they be paying attention to the pulse of the people and then keeping healthy in their mind, their heart, their spirit? What is that? What is that essence that leader should have? And also how in leadership are they submitting to the will of the people?
So to submit to the will of the people is to understand that you're a part of the people. To submit to the will of the people is to understand that you're a part of the people, that you're a product of the people. To go even deeper, right? The issues that we're wrestling with, that we're trying to solve, we're a product of. We're a product of poverty. All right, and I need to detour just a minute. I remember seeing in a commercial where LeBron James says he comes from humble beginnings. And there's many of us who take that same concept, right? Because we come from poverty that made us humble. Fuck no, that's a backwards thinking. It's nothing about poverty that makes you humble. Poverty is attack on your humanity. Because one, we have not been taught to be able to attach. Like poverty is man-made. Poverty is woman-made. Poverty just doesn't exist out of the thin air. It's created for a particular reason and is attached with black people as a form of anti-blackness. Right? The humbleness comes out of the ability to love each other. The humbleness comes out of the ability to, okay, I don't have nothing, but I'm gonna share with my brother. I'm gonna share with my sister. I'm gonna share with my friend. I know when I came up, there was a rule. If you didn't have enough to share with nobody, you didn't give. Why? Because you didn't want to create a discomfort. You didn't want to have somebody feel less than. I remember when growing up, again, those are my homies who didn't have, and those of us who fortunately may have had a little more, I would go home and take out of my refrigerator to give. Or my homie, he couldn't stay at home that night. Hey, I sneak him in. He's sleeping in my room. I mean, these are the methods. These are the strategies. This is the love that we have for each other. We're figuring other ways out. And this is where, like, so many of us are running from the problems. We have not addressed the absence of not having our fathers in our lives and the pain that comes from it. We have not addressed the ill from the dynamics of being raised by a mother and the sexism and the patriarchy of the society that caused the pain in her life that condemned her and blamed her for the father not being there, that made it more heavy on her heart and her mind to be able to raise 1, 2, 3, 4 children by herself. We have not resolved the pain of a child, whether you're a man or you're a boy or whether you're a girl or you're either or, and you're confused about your sexuality or you think you should be this way, but the society doesn't embrace you. Right? We have not resolved that was within us. So as adults, this is what I mean that we run from it, right? And when we go back and heal that is what has provided me with the leadership that I have. To be able to constantly look in the mirror and look at JoJo, the little boy that was hurt because his father was there, the little boy that was hurt because of what his mother suffered from, the little boy that suffered from the dynamics of racism, but no one ever taught me the dynamics of racism. The little boy that grew up and as the business in my neighborhood began to close, my neighborhood began to collapse. The little boy that joined the gang because I didn't feel like I had a family at home, so I found a family in the streets. And when I found a family in the streets, the older guys took advantage of me. Physically, mentally, spiritually. Not only me, my homeboys took advantage of the homegirls. This is a recycled behavior that has a root in and self-hatred that is perpetuating the genocide. And so going back to Dr. Bobby E. Wright, he developed a term, menocide. Menocide means the deliberate destruction of a group of people's mind. And once we seize our mind, we know how to connect with people. But to connect with people, like those who I truly look up to, Malcolm X, Chokwe Lumumba, right? I think those individuals, and mind you, they wasn't complete. They were still a work in progress. But I think if we examine their lives, and Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, right? Audre Lorde, right? When we examine these individuals, we see leadership, but we see their leadership is resulting in loving the people. Bunchy Carter, another example. He said, my judgment of recruiting you was determined by how much love that you have for the people. So as an organizer, your love came out of you come from that environment. If you come from that, again, Kari, why would I send you on Tireman and you off Davidson? Go on Davidson, bro. You know all the people. You know the liquor stores. You know the gas station owners. You know the little homies over there. Go organize that. And then as you get experience, now we'll send you on Tireman. Now you have a model. Now you have a framework that you can go do. And that's people who reach out to me, like, how can I duplicate this in my neighborhood? Well, come and get a taste of it. See how, because it's more than just, of buying backpacks. Because in the early process, the first major event that I helped organize which ultimately turned into the backpack event was a school drive. We only got like 20, 30 people that came out. We only had like 20 or 30 people that came out. I was discouraged. I was hurt because, again, you think people going to come out in groves. But sitting through that pain, sitting through that hurt, and realizing like people, they knew me as JoJo. They didn't know me as Yusef. But now some people can't even pronounce my name. But they talk about the backpack event. They talk about the Mama Cool House. They can talk about the urban network. Right, and vice versa, because the work is, when we make the work about our individual selves, see, that's a failure in our leadership. We have too many so-called leaders, I repeat, so-called leaders, where the work is about themselves. That's what capitalism does. But also, we have to stop of being so quick to call somebody a leader. Like, because the definition that we're giving as a leader may not be your definition. But again, if you sit there and you examine the history of individuals, their flaws, like Elijah Muhammad. Like, okay, Elijah Muhammad, he had a thing for girls, for women. It doesn't take away from all the other stuff he did, right? But I can't exclude that. So for myself, I had to look at myself as a man. How do I address that in myself, but also address it in the sense of, I may be good looking and I may be educated, but also the dynamics of what I do make me more attractive. How do I sit in that power that I hold, that women may find me even more attractive? And I failed. I failed a lot in that situation because no one taught me how to do it. I had to figure that out on my own. And figuring that out on my own, I had to realize the power that I had as a result of that. Right, and how would I use that power? And we see that every day. So like when I was in prison, every guy in prison is not reading for transformation. There's some guys reading for manipulation. I repeat, not every guy is reading for transformation. Some guys are reading for manipulation. The same shit that we see in politicians, right? Because they saw it as a form of power. The fact that most guys on the yard was ignorant. And ignorant is not a bad thing. Ignorant only means not to know. But many of us make ignorance a way of life. So the ability to sit here and read this book and read that book, or more importantly, some of the most favorite books, The Art of War, Deception of Power, those books, those very manipulative books where now you position yourself and things.
And as we think about this in leadership, you spoke to it, but also your namesake, Yusef Bunchy Shakur.
Right.
And we're talking about Detroit, in the state of Black Detroit, but the namesake of Bunchy Carter and what that represents from Los Angeles and organizing with the Panthers, but really the community. Can you share with us why that namesake, what Bunchy Carter represents to you when we think of that leadership that you speak to?
That's a great question, and I think that's important at this time because it really summarized everything I said. Like, so in the African tradition, I ask. That's why we call on our ancestors, because they just don't die. They live with us. They live amongst us. We call their names. So, and selected the name Bunchy was to see Bunchy continue to live, and he does in other spaces, but also to do my part. But more importantly, when I learned about Bunchy, again, so going back to that being humble, it's nothing unique about me per se. I'm part of a unique experience. That experience includes a Malcolm X, includes a Bunchy Carter, includes a Sanyika Shakur, includes a Claude Brown, meaning these individuals who've come out of rough situations, find themselves in prison and transform their lives. So I reason in my mind, I relived Bunchy life all over again. Because why? Because I didn't know Bunchy. I didn't know the opportunity to transform my life how Bunchy did. So I was already on that path. I was already transforming myself. So this took it to another level. But also, as my father taught me, when we take on a new name, every time you hear your name, you hear the meaning of your name. There's the part of the accountability, personal to myself. So when I'm out here, Yusef Bunchy Shakur, it means something. How it's a reputation to that name. That I don't want bullshit to be associated with that name. I want love, I want passion, I want commitment. But also part of my name, my whole name means honorable soldier, thankful to God. Right? But also again, so like Bunchy represents the LA Panthers, but Shakur represents the East Coast Panthers, the Shakur tribe, Astada Shakur, Lumumba Shakur, Zay Shakur, Matulu Shakur. And their father, Saladin Shakur, right? So, and people ask me all the time, like when they hear the name Shakur, like, are you kin to Tupac? Like, not physically, not by blood wise, but we're kin in struggle wise. Because again, that name we all adopted or took, taking that name as a commitment, as a sacrifice to understanding that we're sacrificing who we was to be who we are to fight for the liberation of black people. So that's when combining that, but more importantly, like Bunchy was a bad mama jamma. I mean, I'm not trying to be Bunchy, but I'm being Bunchy in my own way. Combining like there's a lot of similarities, and again, being humble, like being the humility of it, is like I'm walking in his footsteps, and I'm creating a pathway by connecting those dots.
So tell us the story of Bunchy and how you interpreted that and how that inspires you as you look to an ancestor for leadership.
So I remember reading This Side of Glory. It's a book written by David Hilger. David Hill was the chief of staff of the Black Panther Party. Bunchy will be considered, or what we would consider culture. Bunchy was educated, formally and informally. And he was a great speaker. And Elger, he struggled with speaking. And Bunchy told Elger, like, hey man, no, you could do good at this. Just focus on what you know, not what you don't know. And when I read that, that was very, very powerful, impactful to me. So even as we celebrate Kwanzaa, and those of us don't, some of us know the story, and some of us don't know. And so I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention this. Bunchy Carter and John Huggins was assassinated at UCLA in Los Angeles by folks who appeared to be members of the US organization, who leader at the time was Ron Karenga, who we associate Kwanzaa with. So there's this split, there's this divide in the black community, those of us know, but also be remiss of as well the torture that Ron Karenga had perpetrated on some sisters. Like those things are still lingering, even though some of it has been resolved in some circles and shit. But in Taste of Power, written by Elaine Brown, she talks about like somebody, some rank and file members, again, because they had not totally transformed themselves, they're engaging this feud between the ORSA organization and the Black Panthers, where they did something to antagonize Ron Karenga and his organization, and they responded to Bunchy, whatever, and Bunchy pulls up on the members and saying, in a nutshell, like black people are not our enemy, that we have to resolve this contradiction. And that's again, it's so easy to fall into being a nigga. It's so easy to fall into this ego thing. Bunchy, again, his commitment, his love was for the people. Like here was a guy, and through organizers, that they would organize parties, and it was political parties. Again, when I say political, we're not talking about electoral. We're talking about the conscience of building, organizing people. And then at the halfway through the party, they would cut the music off, and Bunchy would get up there and recite a poem, and he would recite some other things, right? So instead of trying to impose the ideology and the practice of the Black Panther Party, he used the party as a way to introduce it. And I just conclude this, man. I remember reading somewhere where it said that all the women wanted Bunchy and all the men wanted to be like Bunchy. He was a powerful brother.
All right, and before we get to the last two, I definitely want to touch back on housing. Mm-hmm. We had something very powerful this week leading up to this. You touched a little bit on this. Gentrification seems to be a topic that talks about that has become a sexier topic, more discussed as time goes on. What exists, and you definitely gave a great context leading into this and starting this speech. Mm-hmm. What is housing? And really, what does residency look like for Black Detroit right now, for the families, for the people looking to start families? And then let's expand even housing to land itself, even for people that want to run businesses or community centers or just have spaces to share.
Right.
What's the importance of that 2022 right now for Black Detroit?
So just building off what I said in the beginning, there's like 4 houses that has been a cornerstone of my life. There was a house on Elmhurst between Livernois and I-96. All my grandmothers and her brothers and sisters, like that was that first house. They lived in right around the corner on Tuxedo between the same area. My grandfather owned that house. He still owns. He still lives there today. My auntie, when she got old enough and started her family, she moved off on Indiana in Puritan. My cousin still owns that house, and then the house here on Ferry Park. Like, so, ownership of houses is always, when I think back, has always been part of my life. It's always been instrumental, and I think in all of our lives, right? We've gotten away from, because of this, what like oppression, and it's so slick that you get a good job, or you get what you think is a good job, and you shift. You lose. We lost our connection to our struggle. We lost our connection to our legacy. That's a legacy. That's like, you can't learn that in school. You learned that right from your family. You learned that from your grandmother and your uncle, and the importance of holding on. And it's something in our minds that has tricked us to, I'd rather live in an apartment. I'd rather live in these new fancy places that I don't own. Again, and this is where, versus owning a $30,000 car that runs well, to trying to own a $100,000 car that you're paying a note on, and it makes you look a certain way. So it comes back to self-worth. Like, we're trying to have our self-worth tied to material things. I mean, even like going to the drug trade, right? You have a guy who invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in a car, but don't even own the house that he lives in. Don't even own the house that he lives in. Because again, he lost that education. So again, when land is essential to freedom. Malcolm taught us land is essential to self-determination. Land is essential to independence. Like, land is the only thing they're not making more of. Right? And so what they've done, they've tricked us out of it, because we've lost and we devalue the importance of land. But then there's a few of us who still understand it, but they're doing it from an individual standpoint. They're not doing it from a collective. Like, so like, people are telling me, like, man, why you ain't about all this stuff? Because again, I'm not trying to be the man. I'm trying to be a part of a process. Because fundamentally, if you own everything, that means that's the problem with the king situation. Like, everybody has to look up to the king. He or she, but ultimately somebody wants to knock the king off, because somebody wants to be the next king. So, I mean, housing is part of that philosophy of helping us understand it is the cornerstone of our peace. It is the cornerstone of our tranquility. It is the cornerstone of our liberation. The housing also has to transition to the ideology of understanding it is the foundation for a family. It is the foundation for building something. And so if we don't have that, we have what we have now: scatteredness, confusion. Every man, every woman, every person for themselves. And so the ability to be able to, houses in Detroit are still relatively cheap compared to other places. But we have not done like an inventory. Like, who could do carpeting? Who could do roofing? Who could do flooring? Right? But who's willing to do these things? Not necessarily always for capital. It could be social capital. And these are part of these deeper conversations. Because again, if you talk to somebody, same thing like a child. Hey, what do you want to do when you graduate from high school? I want to go to college. They may not mean that, but that's what they've been conditioned. You talk to an adult, like, man, I want to own my own house. Where do I begin? And so we suffer not only from the lack of knowing who we are, but the lack of knowing how to operate within the system, and how there's resources out there, but they're coming in our communities scarcely of how to utilize those. And by the time we learn about it, it's too late, or we're not sharing it with each other. So it's so many dynamics to it. But I think to your other part of your question, like, we have to transition. How do we reposition ourselves? How do we do business and things? So I would have never dreamed in a million years to turn a house into a community center. It's not the first time it's been done. But for me, the aha came, like, why wouldn't I want to do that, right? But also, I think we have to begin to create opportunities with with the housing market still being what it is in Detroit, like, hey, let's commit ourselves to purchasing some of these houses and duplicating these community spaces throughout the city of Detroit, but also creating, like, people are still buying houses, but it's a hustle. They're doing, you're allowing people to stay in them, but are you genuinely trying to, like, ultimately turn the house over to the person to own? And now that shit comes back to values. And I think we have to question what our values are. That will help determine, how we serve people. Because all this shit is nothing but a tool. The car we drive, the house that we live in, the clothes, the money, it's all a tool. As they say, the old folks say, you ain't taking that shit in the casket with you. So how are you utilizing that to help other people, but also helping yourself?
All right. And now we get into two of the strongest pillars from this that I definitely wanted your perspective. And I'll be looking for feedback from others as well. I definitely want to touch on access to opportunity. Yeah. And what does access to opportunity look like for Black Detroit? Why is that important? And how do we embrace what is an opportunity for Black Detroit?
I think the access to opportunity comes out of the access of relationships. We have to build better relationships with each other. And I'm not talking about personal relationships. I'm talking about business relationships. Just talking about across different lines. And then the relationship doesn't mean you have to like someone. And because out of that, it creates greater opportunities. But also, more opportunities comes out of what you do for yourself. The more I began to change how I thought, the more I began to change how I behaved, even when I had less money, even when I had less resources, opportunities began to open up for themselves. Give an example. Fast forward to now, there's folks who say, man, hey, Yusef, here's $10,000 that I can write a check for you. Or I can introduce you to my network, and it's worth $50,000. No, this is an option. Here's two opportunities. Which no rush or no pressure. Take your time, think about it. Which one that you want to operate out of? At one point, I probably would just take the $10,000 and keep it moving, right? Because how often do you see $10,000, like that, right? But when you look at the $50,000, more importantly, the networking, again, the relationship, your net worth has to be determined by your network. Again, repeat, your net worth has to be determined by your network. And your network is about building relationships. There's a ton of people that don't necessarily agree with what I say or how I present myself. But there's more people that respect me in the consistency and the authenticity, right? And many of those folks, I'm pretty sure if I came to them and I said, man, I need such and such. Out of that has created accessibility to opportunity. But I think I'm shifting from instead of saying like-minded, like value. There's a lot of like value people out here. And the difference between like-minded and like value is, like, you can like me today. I can like you today. But not like your ass tomorrow. Because you might be hanging with a motherfucker I don't like. Or you may get on the podcast and say some shit I don't like. Right? I mean, that shit happens all the fucking time. Or the biggest one. I may text you something, and because how my tone of my text came off, what the fuck did he mean? And now we in this rabbit hole, right? But when you got values and you're dealing with from a like value standpoint, it transcends the individual. If I like Kari or Kari like Yusef, and we gonna hang out, we gonna do double dating, all that little cheesy ass shit. But it's more business, it's more people oriented, and it's more of us that's really out there. But we're so, and this is the dynamic of white supremacy, white terrorism, white aggression. That deceptionist. Oh, Kari, you're so great. Oh, Yusef, you're so wonderful, right? But it keeps us away from each other. You and I have been fortunate. We are very intentional with each other. We are very intentional around our relationship. Where we're not hesitant. Hey, Yusef, I need you for such and such. Kari, I need you for, and it's not predicated on what you do in return. It's predicated on the value system that we have. But I know at the end of the day, if I need something from you, And if it's in your wheelhouse, you'll do it. And we're not building enough of that. We're not being intentional. Same thing, I always use the rap game, for example. A rapper, there's a party, there's the rapper, and there's the producer. And the first thing the rapper says, man, you hot to the motherfucker. I love to rap on your beats. And the rapper responds, you dope as hell. I would love for you to rap on my beats. And what happens? They exchange numbers. Or nowadays, they exchange emails. And nothing ever happens. Why? Because they get caught up on their individual struggle. And it's only until they run into each other again, damn, man, I can't wait to rap on your beat. But we're not being intentional enough with each other. And being intentional enough with each other, and we have to redefine what opportunities are. We have to redefine what access to opportunities are. Again, opportunities is always not the green dollar. The opportunity, again, so like, because I'm in your network, you may know somebody, man, I need to do a show. Let me call Yusef. Yusef, on June 25th, man, do you got is the Mama Cool House available? I got my man TEDx, man. I know you don't know him, but this is my man. His resources low, blah, blah, blah. More than likely, on the strength of you, I'm going to do it. And out of that, me and TEDx going to develop a relationship. We may not become best of friends, right? So again, and he don't need a sound system. You got a sound system, right? TEDx, all you got to do is get out there, create some flyers, and pump it up to people, right? And how do I benefit from it? New people are learning about the Mama Cool House. Understanding like you and I are on the same page level. Now, there's different dynamics in the struggle, economically, whatever, but we're even. And we benefit from each other by being intentional of sharing and loving each other. And then also, in that same scenario, so say me and TEDx do develop a relationship. And something break down. First person who I'm calling, Kari. I need you to holler at TEDx, man. He on some bullshit. Or, Kari, Yusef, man. I met him through you. I mean, it's cool to fall out with each other. It happens all the time. But in that process, we have to sit down. What is it? Is it childish? Is it high school shit? Or is it some real shit? Because, I mean, for me, if you betrayed people, if you tried to, sleep with my woman, you stole some money. I mean, there's some shit like unforgivable, right? But then, even then, if you push me for the greater good, I'll be in a room with a motherfucker. I'll coexist with him or her. I mean, and I think these are the dynamics that we're not doing enough of. And what happens is the system doesn't create itself. There's individuals who create the system, but then there's dynamics from the system. And so, white folks and the people in positions of power, they see greater good in you than I do. And that's not until later on, and then they scoop you up. So now you're so insulated in that situation that you no longer can be able to work with me in the way that I need you to. Or it may happen to me. Right, but we have to be more intentional, and by closing these doors, and I've repeated it before, closing the ranks, and like this is a war situation that we in as a people, and we have to create a strategy. Who is our enemy? How does this work? How does this function? Kari, I can go and do this presentation, but it'd probably be better that you do it. You're probably the more smooth of us two. You probably have the better intelligence. Not to say I'm less. I mean, again, this is the strategy that we have to have. In my ego, can I put my ego aside for the greater good? To be able to maneuver like that. Hey, and also understanding like the pressure things that work against us, we flip that. Hey, we may need the sister go in there to talk, right? Where we may need the brother going, we may need the gay one of us, right? But we're using these dynamics for a greater strategy because we like Pac said at one point, which is powerful. When I embrace my weaknesses, I began to flourish. When we begin to embrace our weaknesses around us, they no longer can be exploited against us. No longer say again, Kari, the guy that went to Harvard, Yusef, the guy that went to the penitentiary, but now that I come home, I'm getting treated like the guy that went to Harvard, and the guy that went to Harvard getting treated like the guy that's on the streets. I mean, this is the trickology of what they do, of the old Willie Lynch shit. And also another part of this struggle and this strategy, they don't always have to know that we're working together. We don't always have to telegraph that. So again, we have to have these private conversations, we have to have these public conversations. And then because when we show up, and they realize, oh shit, Because ultimately, they're always going to try to divide us, or the system itself would do it because many of us ain't never had shit.
Now, in this, I'm gonna be more direct on certain things and to how to quantify what this is, and I'm sure that it matters in different people. So we spoke a lot about money, but let's think on granting. Let's think on money. Let's think on career or job. Let's also think on awards because accolades and compliments also matter. So like the opportunity for granting. If I have an organization, how should I look at that? The opportunity. Let's just stop there.
Yes, sir, yes.
If I run an organization, the opportunity on granting comes about. How am I supposed to go about this in building my organization and stay on the mission and focus of my organization and see this as an opportunity to engage in?
So my answer is twofold. Theoretically, from this standpoint, if you're trying to just pursue a grant, it's doing the research on it. What's the purpose? If you have the nonprofit status already, you apply for whoopity whoop. Right? That's the simple process of it. In the greater scheme of the things that we're talking about, my question at this stage is, because most grantees, first question they're going to ask you who you're working with. Who do you have a working relationship with, right? So if we've already established that, and we're bringing all of us together, and say, let's just say, just for the sake of it, it's $1 million, right? I don't know the last time your neighborhood seen $1 million. I mean, like literally just $1 million. I don't know. I can't remember last time they just seen nearly $1 million. But how do we create a pie where it comes in and we divide that, right? How do we again collectively? We're centralizing, because ultimately the folks who are the grants or who are writing the money, they have to give the money away, hands down. So fundamentally, they need us. But the problem is we have not centralized a space where the money comes in to through an application process where we're all going to apply together. Yusef, Karish, and Quasi, because to your next part of the question that you was getting at, it's the exceptionalism, the accolades, and all those things. And there's nothing wrong with accolades per se, but it's the exceptionalism that breathes into you as an individual. So, and I know we're not there yet, and this is where I would like for us to get to. This is where I'm pushing myself and pushing others. Like this is where we centralize. Because again, I mean, right now there's 101 nonprofits out here. Somebody right now, that's we're in the new year. That's a goal of this. I want to create my own nonprofit. So again, business wise, why can't I come up under Detroit is different, and just theoretically, I just don't. You could create as a conglomerate, but then create another component to it. But that requires me to trust you. That requires for you to trust me. That requires us to have a real authentic relationship with each other. That requires us to really dig deep down and have conversations that we don't do. We have surface relationships. And so until we address those things, we'll always be creating these small little big fishes in the neighborhoods, and then people seeing you like, oh shit, I want to do what Kari doing. And there's nothing wrong with that, and then all of a sudden they pop up, and you be like, damn. Like little homie, he did it, but it feels a certain type of way because you're like, why didn't he come to me? Why didn't we do? Because ultimately, again, this is where the competition comes in. Because now our resources are split. Now the people are divided. How do I support Kari, and how do I support Yusef? It's easy. It's been done. But with people being human in their mentality and their support being split, again, goes back to likes. No one's functioning from values. They're functioning from personalities. A person like Kari, because he's younger, he may look he looks a little different. He has less gray hair. He's a better rapper. He doesn't cuss as much. I mean, all type of shit goes into this dynamics or whatnot. But these are some of the things that we have to anticipate. And again, we're not there yet. But we have to figure out how to, because ultimately people say, well, I don't see y'all working together, right? Well, And there's some truth there, but then also like with you and I, some people know how close we are, others don't know how close we are. So again, how do we develop that? And not to say like we have to relinquish our own entity, our own identity, but create a umbrella for our own entity, our own identities to coexist up under the umbrella. So if we need to go out, be our own individual selves, we're up under one mission.
And you just spoke on granting, but let's speak more direct to personal, job and career. How should a person be looking at job and career as an opportunity right now? As let's just stop there, and then we'll go to entrepreneurship next.
You know, I mean, as a black person, you should be asking yourself, this job or this career that I'm getting, not only how does it serve me, how does it serve my family, how does it serve my community? I mean, those are literally the steps that we have to take, right? So just say again, if you work in that Family Dollar, right? We know that's a low end type of job, but hey, you working in the neighborhood, you can walk there, you can catch the bus there, right? And so the ability to be if you have a community framework. When I mean community framework, you're accountable to your community. So when we're gonna say Buster, when Buster, the neighborhood alcoholic, the neighborhood crackhead, whatever, he on a bad day, and he in front of the Family Dollar, and he just doing whatever, and people thinking that he's harassing them. You can come out and you realize, oh, that's man, don't worry about it. I got him. I know him. I grew up around him. I mean, he just got a bad day. We don't need to call the police. No, this is where you eliminate that dynamic there. But also part of, again, creating opportunities like this so that young man or that young woman, they're coming here, they don't feel trapped as if the Family Dollar is their last hope. Is their only ability to rise above. Coming here and meeting new people. Coming here that's one reason like I share so much of what I do, because it gives hope to other people. It tells to opportunity. Like I've been to prison. Because I've been to prison, I don't think I can get a bachelor's degree. I don't think I'm worthy of that. Damn, Yusef got a bachelor's degree. Yusef working on blah, blah, blah. Oh, now I can do those things. Or I want to do those things. I mean, so this is part of the domino effect that we have to have, but also creating opportunities of how to work together, creating, because again, I mean, if you don't have a broader reality of the world, why would you think outside of it? So, I mean, like when I grew up in Detroit, I never went to the east side. I mean, the east side was like New York. If you dropped me off on that motherfucker, I wouldn't have knew I'd have been looking for the Fisher Building, like the top of the Fisher Building as my North Star, trying to get back to the west side. And so, and I think that's part of one way getting back to the other thing, of opportunity. We have to expose our horizon of what life is. I mean, this is what books is. This is what going out and experiencing those. I mean, like shit. Most motherfuckers just ate at Churches, ate at Burger Kings. They ain't never ate at a nice restaurant. Don't. And then and we have to reshape and reframe, like, because you eat those things, that doesn't make you white. All right, those things are tied to whiteness because white people are predominantly in the society and they have the greatest access to them. But it doesn't make us less than who we are. And because we don't understand the dynamics that prevents us from experiencing those opportunities and those luxuries, which is part of being human, it adds on the racial component too, because everything in America is racialized.
And that brings us to another component. And definitely we spoke to this throughout leading up as we get to the close and the last thing. But before there, entrepreneurship. How should someone look at the opportunity and the access for that opportunity here in Black Detroit for entrepreneurship?
So yeah, entrepreneurship is a very tricky word, right? So I'm just keeping it in the simple complex is you started a business for yourself, right? And you're trying to do something for yourself. But how you to achieve that, you have to be in a relationship with other people. So what does that look like? So you just can't be, you're being like the Mama Cool House, the backpack event. Everybody look at Yusef because Yusef is sort of the face of it. In reality, none of those things could have been achieved without all the other people. And I know that. And I'm like when at the backpack event, it was my idea. But when people come to me and say, "Man, I love what you're doing," I repeat, man, I couldn't have done it without such and such. I love what we're doing because so that's what my point around entrepreneurship. We have to understand before we can get to cooperative economics. Like it just can't be about just money. Like I just want to be a millionaire. All right, you get a millionaire, then what? Right? Because in that, you have a disconnect, a disassociation from the customers, the people that you're trying to serve. So fundamentally, if you're trying to run a business, you have to understand how your business not only can again impact you, impact your family, but impact and serve your community.
All right, and now comes something big. It's something personal, and it deals with family. And I think one of the biggest opportunities that exists is family and that continued legacy that carries on. So right now, when we think of Black Detroit, how intentional should we be about legacy and thinking of legacy? You spoke on it with the moniker Bunchy, but even over and beyond, how does that expand? What does that look like? What does that feel like?
It's everything. I think if we truly understand what legacy is, then we know that the individual cannot exist without a framework, without something that produced it. So, like I mentioned earlier, you have the Messiah, the Black Messiah, written by Albert Cleage. It's a book. However, it's important. Like, again, if you're trying to do activism and organizing, you need to know about Reverend Cleage. If you're trying to do activism and organizing, you need to Detroit, I Do Mine Die. Reading and learning about the revolutionary, not Ram, but the League of Black Revolutionary Workers. You need to know about Jimmy and Grace Lee Boss and so many others. Like you and I know Ron Scott. Ron Scott was a beautiful brother, very dedicated, highly intelligent, part of the Black Panther Party, part of the coalition against police brutality before he passed. Like if I, as a young whippersnapper, if I just came on the scene and like, man, I'm new, I'm just out here, baby, just support me and just being arrogant in that way, no one's going to support me. No one's going to be able to relate to me because first thing people want to ask you, any people that's worth the assault, who did you learn this from? Who did you study up under? Or what did you study? Because all what we're trying to do is nothing new. That's the importance of legacy. Now, in the legacy, not everybody's going to embrace you. Again, this is nothing new. It's part of life. Or you may have learned to someone and you finally meet them like, damn, he's an asshole. It doesn't, but you gotta be able to put it in a framework though. Like he may be or she may be an asshole. No, they may not be an asshole when you learned about them. Because a lot of us we learn through reading or through word of mouth or whatever, right? And so and also too, and we're all subjugated to these false perceptions. These pedestals that we put people on. Like we make them bigger than life, and then all of a sudden, like, oh shit, this motherfucker is not what I thought he was, right? Or she. But I think so many of us are so ambitious, and we're ambitious with our anger, we're ambitious with our rage, that we have not resolved that. Like when we see like, oh, ain't nobody doing shit, so I'm gonna do it. But we have to ask the question: why do we perceive ain't nobody doing shit? Because in reality, somebody's doing something. We may not know what they're doing, or two, they may not be doing it the way we like them. But again, it comes back to the pain. The hurt. Like most motherfuckers are out here organizing through pain. Most motherfuckers are out here fighting through hurt. They're mad. They're mad because they had no connection to that generation before them. But they have not rationalized that pain and that hurt to be able to understand. And that's part of the legacy, the pain and the hurt. And it's not always COINTELPRO. The counterintelligence program. They definitely has a role. But also, one thing I really appreciate about Tupac, the pain of his mother being a crackhead. The pain that came from his mother who was way up here, who fell down here. He is raised in the movement, right? You love each other. You support each other. But no one's there to love, in his eyes, as a little boy. His first hero, his mother, there was no one there to love her. In her darkest hour, there was no one. And he thought that came to pull her out the light. And there's so many of us caught up in that same pain that Pac had. And we just didn't grow up in the movement directly, but indirectly, right? And we're carrying that pain, we're carrying that hurt. And we have to somehow transform that pain to hurt. Like anger can spark a movement. Rage can spark a movement, but it cannot sustain it. Only love can sustain it. Only transformation can sustain it. And I'm not saying like we think love is passive. Love is not passive. Love is aggressive. Love is strong. Love is strong. Love is stretching. Love is challenging. Love is critical. Love is asking questions. Love is not accepting just anything. Love is pushing yourself and pushing others to be the best. But love is also is pushing you to separate yourself from the bullshit too. Like we have to rethink and reconfigure these terminologies because we're using terminology from other people to determine how we relate to each other. And that's also causing a lot of the chaos and bullshit that goes on. And we have to create a theory. And that's what I'm looking at exploring what Dr. Bobby Wright wrote in here, the importance of a black social theory. It's how to solidify the challenges and the contradictions that we have amongst each other for the purpose of black liberation. And that's where, and I think the anger and the pain, and like I said, we all have some level of anger and pain is greater in some ways. And until we resolve that, is going to prevent us from overstanding the importance of legacy. And so legacy is not only something that we embrace, but legacy is something that we leave. And so what type of legacy that you're going to leave? But also, we're too subjective. We're not objective enough, and we're too YouTube channel watching motherfuckers. We're too taking shortcuts of trying to be like certain individuals versus being ourselves by learning through other individuals and shit.
All right, now you spoke to legacy of thinking from a historical perspective, but now let's talk a little bit about family and children and building there. As your son grows, as your sons grow, your connection, you open with the passing of your grandmother. Please speak on family and what that legacy is in Black Detroit right now.
Well, I mean, I think part of that is, I think most of us don't know, or we lost the touch of the reality of the tradition. This Black radical tradition of coming from the South and coming to the North, of fighting for equality, fighting for freedom, the freedom struggles, right? And we've got a taste of progress, and it has made us complacent and shit. And then we seeing the bullshit, and we've become angry as a result of the bullshit. And the complacency and the anger together is not a good mix. It's like mixing oil and water. So again, fundamentally, my legacy starts with my grandfather, my grandparents, who comes from the South, who migrates up here because of their parents, right? And my part of the legacy, again, I don't embrace Zone 8 because of the gang aspect that I helped create. It's a neighborhood that I've been fortunate to be associated with because my grandfather purchased a house in the neighborhood that was the first legacy that I was introduced to, which was powerful. The second part of my legacy is understanding the relationship between my grandfather and my mother. She being his only child, and her naming me after him. And then the extinction of that legacy, my father, meeting my father in prison, and embracing all the things that he can teach me. So being clothed in all of that, now my responsibility is to share that with my son, share that with my nieces and nephews, but also help others realize that and that. So because Yusef Shakur doesn't come out of thin air, he comes from somewhere. This is Kari doesn't come out of thin air. I mean when people come over and they come to the Detroit different house, and I lived there, 30, 40 some years old. I've lived there all my life. This is the house that me and my parents grew up. This is the house that my grandparents grew in, right? We traditionally, nobody may live here, but hey, and this is where it's getting, the time has changed, but out of that legacy, you maintain that legacy. So when you walk in the house, you see the plaque of your grandmother and your grandfather and whatnot, but you're expressing it through who you are. So this is the part of the new legacy that you're adding on to. Same thing here. Like when people come in, they realize literally my mother lives down the street. But also like when we was doing a backpack event, down the street at my mama's house. Like you saying, like you just don't invite anybody to your mama's house or to your parents' house and shit. And so part of that was shifting how we thought, but also my mother. I joke with her because when I was a kid, my grandfather like that lot is yours. So like mine is my lot, but she owns it. So she allowed me to use her lot. But then what happened? She cooked the food. My sister started getting involved. Like they not activists, they not everyday activists, but in that type of environment, in that type of setting, we created opportunities for them to get involved. And so out of that, what happens is, growing up, walking down the street, just going to walking to the community house or whatever, and the little kid be like, that's the guy that gave me a backpack, or thank you, or the kids coming home from college like, hey, I remember when you gave me a backpack, or it's so many things that like this is part of the family. Well, because there's the immediate family, but then there's the extended family. We forget about how important the extended family was in the black community, and we have to get back to that. Because when you you're a single mother and or a single dad or whatever the case may be, and you got to make a run, and you can't take the kids with me. Hey, Kari, can you watch them or look out for them? Woo. Or just go play with Kari kids. This is the type of the kinship that we develop. That again, these since we don't have these frameworks, or because the hood is what it is, it doesn't manufacture that type of relationship anymore. When we lived in neighborhoods, hey, Miss Minnie, my mama said, can we borrow some rice? Or going down. Now, this was the importance of a Crockett store in the neighborhood. The money may be short. Hey, go ask Mr. Crockett's, can we put some things on credit till we get some money? Sure, but he's not over trying to tax nobody. Creating an extortion ring and shit. These are the internal relationships that is so crucial. That's part of a family legacy, an extended family legacy, and a neighborhood legacy. That's all associated with Black Detroit, with Black folks.
All right, now as we get to the end of this, I definitely want you to give a close. I want to thank you for offering this, and we're going to continue on this legacy, and not just here. We're going to expand. It's a relationship, as you said, that's in silence. Everything is not so explicit, but a connection between four of the community houses and organizers. That would be the four, and we're an extension of our collectives, along with GMAC, our brother GMAC, Greg McKenzie. Shout out to him and everything he does with Molly Wop, and also so much of everything that he's doing with Al Keebalon Village. But you mentioned
Mama
Quasi. You mentioned Quasi and the Shed. So he definitely is a part of this collective. Also, Mama Shu. When we think of Mama Shamayeen and everything she's done with Avalon Village, right in Highland Park. And when we talk about Black Detroit, I don't think Black Detroit gets blacker than Highland Park. And that's in my opinion. And it's a stone's throw away from what I'm organizing and what I do. And also Carolyn Baker and what's happening with the General Baker Institute right on Livernois in a historic place. When we think of the Mays Printing Press, but the organizing that's happening there. And right here where we are in Mama Akua House in Zone 8 with Yusef Bunchy Shakur. In the space that I run, the Detroit is Different incubator space, which is expanded to a lot of studio. And that's what the Detroit is Different community group, the 501c3, what we're starting. But we're going to keep building upon this address, and along with this address, myself and Yusef will offer more content connected. We haven't had a name yet, but it will be more topical. It will be more urgent of what's happening, not just in Black Detroit, but Black America in an international perspective. We will be doing more, and Detroit is Different. We'll be doing more with the Vegan Tuesdays that happen here at Mama Cool House. So 2022 is an expansion year for Detroit is Different. It will be stretching out for Mama Akua House and our collective, the community movement builders, and more so for community. If you have ideas, like I say, creativity, culture, community, those are the pillars of what Detroit is Different is run under. And I have an ear for anyone connecting in that. So that's my piece before your close. You can give your closing statement. Also, for everyone that's given throughout this, who's watched and tuned in, who supported for this campaign, thank you so much. As we get to wrap up the year, this is something big for us. I want to thank everyone that's connected. But now I give back to you, Yusef, and you can close out.
I started off acknowledging my grandmother who just passed, acknowledging all of us who are, especially now currently what's going on with COVID. I mean, I think I know more people now and today than I did a year ago who had COVID. And worst of times is when we've shined the best, and we have to figure out how to support each other, how to love each other, how to share our resources. Everything that's been said, I think that's the cornerstone of Black Detroit. We can dig, and there's a lot of problems. I'm never one to shy from them. It's a lot of bullshit. It's a lot of fake motherfuckers. But I think more than that, man, there's those of us who have the potential, who have the network, who have the wherewithal. We just got to find ways to work closely together. And we don't. I know like most of us. I'm not trying to spend 10 a meeting to meet. I think again that there's enough framework out there that we can borrow from to be able to build what we need to build. I know we live in a day where you Google, Hangout. It's just so much stuff that you can do nowadays to versus the old school organizing. But we have to be better organizers. We have to be better managers of our time. But also, one of the powerful things that of our tradition that we've forgotten, like we don't assess our community no more. We don't assess our neighborhoods in terms of what are we missing. And so little Billy's we need a doctor. So we've trained and we've coached little Billy up to be the doctor. We need a judge. So Susan's going to be the judge. I mean, these are some of the pillars thinking that has to take place, but it has to be centered in what I'm working on and will be working on my PhD was this Black liberation paradigm through this Black social theory of creating a governing body to address the contradictions between Black men and Black women and Black LGBTQ, between older and younger, between different organizations, between light skin and dark skin. I mean, all the same vices and social ills that was perpetrated and imposed on us to cause confusion are still here today. But despite that, we're raising above that. So again, a new year, new opportunities. Again, to show the worth and the value. Kari, what Detroit is different, what he's doing. Hey, a part of our social capital. I need you to do this. Bet it's easy. Like supporting him is supporting me, and supporting him is supporting me. Like that's simplistic, and along with other folks. Why? Because beyond he's a genuine guy that I like. That we there's a value system that we operate, and our values. If we really wrote them down, they probably some of them are the same, some of them may be different, but fundamentally we both operate from a value system, right? We both willing to be the thumb in the room, to be the elephant, to ask the tough questions, not try to go along to get along. I mean, and that's when you get about being a leader, I think that's a fundamental thing about being a leader that questions the housing situations in Detroit. Again, centering those. If we're not centering those who have the least of us, then what is for? Because democracy doesn't start at the top; it starts at the bottom. In the education, if we don't receive our education on what it means to be Black and how to love our Black selves, any other education will not serve us. And without having that type of education, we'll always be searching for justice from someone else. Justice has to come out of the reorientation of who we are, the commitment of loving ourselves, which will govern the type of economics that is serving and putting us first for the quest for Black liberation. Black economics have to serve Black liberation, and out of that creates the access to opportunities, and it's wrapped up in the legacy that we've inherited and the legacy that we're trying to build and pass on. All power to the people.
Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.